Hey y'all, Data Guy here. With the Snowflake Summit coming on us in about a month, I've decided to go deep on a few different Snowflake use cases. And the first one today is running a simple ML model on data stored within Snowflake. So this is a really great DAG that you can kind of build on and use if you want to run your own ML models using existing Snowflake data. So some of the advantages of this is obviously you don't have to bring your data outside of Snowflake. You can use Snowflake's extremely low cost for querying and transforming data to keep your cost of actually running your ML model low. And this also is really great since it's all orchestrated through Airflow. It's great if you want to then take this model and serve it to another location. You're bringing in data into Snowflake before running the transformations. You can really extend this in a lot of different ways. So today, we'll just be going through the basic flow of querying the table, transforming it, and then running that model on it. But you'll kind of see through it how you can extend this into other use cases or even just build on top of this, maybe build your ingestion pipeline, maybe build an analytics pipeline at the end of it. So without further ado, let's get into it. So we'll switch over to VS Code now. So here to kind of set the stage, we have our DAG. So what this DAG is going to be doing is exactly as I just described. It's doing some extraction, transforming of data within Snowflake, then running a random forest classifier machine learning model on that transformed data. And the really cool thing about this is that this DAG was generated with the Astro Cloud IDE, which allows you to build Airflow DAGs that actually need to know Airflow. You can just plug in your SQL code, enter your Snowflake connection details, and it'll generate the rest of the DAG for you. So you'll notice that kind of involves some of the latest conventions around the Astro SDK and task decorators. That is basically the layer underneath that Cloud IDE. But not important to you unless you want to learn how to write DAGs without knowing how to write Airflow code. Which you can go check out on astronomer.io. But enough about that. Let's get into the actual DAG. So not a ton of imports here. You're just going to need to bring in the DAG, obviously decorator, Astro SQL as AQL and Astro SQL imports table. What these are two new task flow decorators that we call the Astro SDK. And so essentially what you can do here is just write your SQL code and without needing to do any other kind of transformations, you can pass it to a Python into a Python data frame, pass it into pandas, and vice versa. So it makes it really easy to switch your data interaction language from Python to SQL and back and forth. And so kind of see this within the context of this pipeline. We're going to be using SQL for the initial transformation, but then passing that data to a Python transformation or Python machine learning model that leverages the pandas data frame without actually ever needing to convert the data. So just eliminates a lot of those kind of, I hate to say about bitch work steps where you're just like, okay, I got the data in this format. Now I got to convert it into another format so it actually works with this next task. And it's not impactful work. It's just relabeling and reorganizing. So you'll also need to have your pandas as PD and importing pendulum as well. After you're done with that, you'll want to import your Snowflake connection ID, just store it as a variable so you can keep referencing it. If you don't know how to set a Snowflake connection, check out my other video on it because it is a little bit tricky. And then what table you'd actually like to use. So you can see we're including the database name, schema, and table that we'll be executing this in. So now that we've done that, we can start building some tasks. So here we're again using that AQL data frame, which allows us to read data from this just as a data source agnostic data frame. So this, even though I'm going to be executing some Python or SQL, I can then read it from Python to SQL and vice versa here. So in this case, because I'm importing this transform table as a pandas data frame, now I can just reference it as a pandas data frame. And so here, first thing we're doing in this task, so this is a task where we're actually going to be defining that model and running it. You're going to choose which model, so model selection, train test split, your pre-processing standard scalar, and your random forest classifier that we're actually using for assembling it. So you'll probably be using different models here, but just wanted to call out this is where you would add them. Instead of importing them at the top here, you'll actually import them within the body of the function. And then here, we have f equals transform table. So that pandas data frame we just read in. And then you setting the baseline accuracy, setting our X and Y, doing some test training, doing some standard scaling and transforming to fit. Then we're down here running that actual modifier with some parameter, or the actual model with some parameters, fitting it, and then giving ourselves a model score Then finally, we're going to list all the different features that were important, and then return the baseline accuracy, model score, and important features contained within that data set. So pretty standard ML work, nothing too fancy, but just really cool that we can just write this in Python and have it operate directly within a Snowflake database. So really helpful. So now that we've got that model written out, let's start writing our extraction and transforming. So here we have our second task at AQL transform. So within here, what we're doing is connecting to Snowflake, setting a task ID, and then within this defined query table function, you'll write your actual SQL query that you want to carry out, and this will execute the SQL query within your Snowflake database, and then return you the result. So we're going to take this return result. So this is basically pulling whatever data we want to pull from within Snowflake, and then it's going to bring it into Airflow so that then in our next task, we can actually transform this data and get it ready for fitting that model and creating it. And so here we have our second transform function. So what we're doing here is reading in this query table, which you can see is done like this. So taking query table, reading it in just as a SQL table, so not transforming it to pandas yet. And again, connecting to Snowflake, writing this SQL query to create a new data set that we're going to be using for our machine learning model, as we all know. So now that we've got all of our functions written out, let's put them all together in the DAG. So here in the DAG definition, really nothing crazy, just the pendulum, just for safekeeping on making sure the datetime is accurate, and your DAG run timeout. So good old DAG run timeout, maybe it'll work, maybe it won't. This is, I guess, good if you're just worried about the general length of the DAG, but in general, make sure you're careful with using timeouts in production. So the actual DAG code is pretty simple since we're just calling the functions we've already defined. Here, we're again using the taskflow API, so that's why the function calling is kind of just like, hey, query table equals query table function, close parentheses. It's really simple when you're using taskflow decorators and especially the Astro SDK. So here then we're just using transform table, which is reading the results of that query table. So that's how this data set is being passed into here under query table. And then you'll see for the model task function, it's just directly reading that SQL table that was returned, but it's reading it in as a pandas data frame. So that's what I was talking about earlier, where you don't need to convert it now. You can just send SQL into a pandas data frame automatically, and the Astro SDK takes care of it behind the scenes. Then just for setting the order of the functions, we're just having transform table comes after query table, and transform table comes after model task, just to set the relationships between these different tasks. And that's really it. That is our task, or that is our DAG fully complete. But wait, one more thing. I forgot to add the DAG declaration at the bottom. So now you have DAG object equals our dog intelligence DAG. And that is everything I had for you today. So I hope you learned something, whether it's about Snowflake or Airflow or about the SDK. That's what we're here for, it's just to learn and grow as Airflow professionals together. So have a good one, y'all. Data Guy out.